Go YouTube. Let's do this thing. Come on. Come on. Alright. We look like we're live. We're going to take a few minutes before I get into the topic, just because we'll let people get in and all that stuff. I don't do like fancy cool loading screens or anything like some of the other streamers do. But I'll cover a couple questions and just like a random note, and then we'll get into the topic. So, EJ Fishes, I'm pretty sure I got your email. Yeah, I've just been so I had to work this weekend. Um, I worked until 8 o'clock last night, and then came home to work more on other stuff that wasn't my job related, but my job related. You guys know what I mean. Uh, and then I've worked a ton today, so yeah, we're gonna let people get through the ad and all that kind of stuff. So I do plan to get to it. I'm hoping that tomorrow is quiet enough for me to do some email time, because I've got a bunch of stuff to do as soon as I'm done with live stream. Because yeah, my work life has been crazy busy, and I'm technically not even done for the day. I'm basically taking a break to live stream, and then I will work remotely to do a bunch of reporting nonsense I have to do. If I wasn't already like fully gray haired, I think I would have gained some more just in the last 2 days. Um, I'll check though, and if I don't see it, I know I've got another email from you somewhere. I'll ping you just in case. But another like random thing I did. So while I was waiting for this, so like I have this set of tests that I do at work that takes about an hour, right? It's kind of long, but it's semi-automated. I basically have to check in on it like every 3 to 5 minutes, right? I don't have to like pay perfect attention the whole time, like a lot of what I do entails. Uh, so I checked out randomly this other video streaming platform. So it's clearly a competitor to YouTube, because I was curious, right? For those who have ever curious, it's a platform called Odyssey, which is Odyssee. Don't worry, it's not like I'm running away from YouTube or anything. It was one of those things where like one of my favorite non-fish creators has been using it, and he's a gaming creator, by the way. So he does a lot of like gaming news, and I was just curious what the heck its scheme was or what have you. It's weird and interesting. It has like a kind of like how Twitch has bits, if you're familiar with Twitch and streaming, that you can earn just by like interacting with the platform. It gives you their form of cryptocurrency. Basically, they have an actual cryptocurrency that they've established, and it was just one of those things where like I had this short period of time. Yeah, it's all blockchain. Jeremiah Tudor apparently is a little familiar. I had a little bit of time. It's on the LBRY network library for those that aren't putting the two and two together there. And I was just looking at it, and I was kind of like, yeah, that's interesting. I don't know. It's really tiny. I think I became like the largest fish creator if I were to like port part of my channel over there. And you can just do that, right? You can just port your stuff over, and it just copies it basically. So I glanced at it for fun. And that was my one moment of entertainment over. I don't know. I think I put in like 12 hours of work over Saturday and Sunday. My days off. All right. So with that being said, random notes. I think we've given time to get through like the one ad or two ads or however 800 whatever YouTube puts in front when I'm trying to make it only one. If I could control the number of ads YouTube played at the start of my video, even though it's horrible for like the monetization of my channel, I would be so happy to just put one. One. Because I hate like me as a person, I pay for YouTube Premium because I hate getting even two commercials at the start of a video I want to watch. And a lot of times, actually, watch is like in quotation marks. I'll put on a playlist in the morning while I drive into work, and I'll just listen to it. And mostly that's fish creators. A lot of my morning is almost always fish creators. But yeah, so if I could control things, it would be terrible for my channel's ability to earn money. But I would be a much happier human being. As stupid as that sounds. All right, let's get into the topic. Uh, and it's funny that you happen to be here. I want to be really, really, really clear. This topic, Woodworker Royer is actually in chat. This topic is spawned just because we had some back and forth on a couple of comments this morning, and I think while I was at lunch, talking about some budget lighting, and I want to be really, really clear that like, this is not in any way meant to like hate on you and be inflammatory, any of that kind of stuff. Okay, this is something that like I face as a person who wants to review as much things as I can, but am hampered by time, budget, etc. So, there's kind of a dilemma in budget lighting, and why I say this is when we look at like the swath of budget lighting out there, right? You have some of the things that have been around for a while, like your Night Crews, your Aquaneats, Beams Work, but we have way more that are coming into the fold. JCMP is a great example. Higer is a great example. Even to some extent, like Phoenix is some extent slightly budget in the sense of their Stingray line, but for the most part, these tend to be made in China under a random name. Like I've got a light that I love that I used on my shallow tank for a little while called a Paw Fly. I've never seen another product from this company. I've only seen that one light in one size, but it was perfect for the application I needed, and it was dirt cheap. It was like $30, which for like 7 different light modes, dimming built into it, and I could raise and lower it because of the stands that were on it. That seemed like a really good deal to me, to just kind of like, let's find out how good this stupid thing is. You know, like JCMP's got the clip-on light that's behind me, which pretty soon I'll be done with this, and I'll go back to having a lid and not as much evaporation on my tank. I have to reinstall. I've got a new lid, or a new light for the lid. But the dilemma is this. JCMP is a good example, and I'm so far I'm pretty happy with JCMP stuff, but we have that 24/7 light, and I still get a lot of questions about that light. Woodworker and I were talking about this a little bit back and forth, because comparing it to like the Higer light, which from all I can tell, they're the same light. I don't have one in hand, so I can't really test everything I need to know if they're the exact same light. But from what I can tell, just looking at pictures versus the one that I have personally, they're made by the same manufacturer. They are probably the same light. Right? This is just how some of these companies work. Well, JCMP's already moved on past that light. So I've got a video that's out for a light you can no longer purchase. And this, to me, is like one of the biggest problems in a lot of budget lighting, is often things that are in the budget lighting game get cycled so fast. You have a new iteration seemingly every 6 months. And there's like some of the Aquaneats and stuff have been there for a while, but there's so many of these things coming into the market because, for the most part, China is making so many of them for whatever random name you want to call in, or some major manufacturing company decides that they're going to start making masses of lights because it's economically feasible for them. The problem isn't necessarily like that they're cheap, right? This isn't the problem. There's a space for budget-friendly lighting, right? There's definitely a space for budget-friendly lighting. You don't have to have the UNS Titan, the ADA Solar RGB, right? We don't have to have these $500 and $600 lights, like the Kessel 360s, like these ludicrously priced lights. And I mean, I own some of them. So I know firsthand how insanely expensive some of these things are, and I have grand plans down the line to like show you guys what you're getting for your buck, right? But that requires space. That's my biggest problem. Freaking space. But the thing is this. For as many $500 lights there are, like I can think of the ONF flat one, the Twin Star, right? There's like 4 really expensive brands. There's like seemingly 50 budget-friendly lights all fighting for the same space. So from the creator perspective, me, the person who's trying to review and give people good input on these lights, what they can and can't do, if they're good, if they suck, whatever, right? From that perspective, there's so many of them, it's almost impossible to keep up. From the perspective of the hobbyist, I think the biggest flaw in some of these is that they come out so fast that it's almost a disservice that the companies don't stay with lights for very long. Or more importantly, that like some of those companies just flare out or don't upgrade their technology in any way, shape, or form. The beams work has been around forever, right? Beams works were old when I came back to this hobby in 2016. They had been around for a while as like the great budget option. And I can remember back then so many people being like, well, you can't grow plants on a beams work if you don't have a current or something better than that. It's never going to work. Right? And I remember like showing pictures of my tanks and just being like, you're going to tell me that these are not well grown in, established low-tech tanks using a cheap beams work light, right? And these are like my old big my big rainbow tank, for example, that had that huge like field of lotuses and stuff like that. And it's just like, I'm growing plenty of plants on this stuff. But some examples of this, I think like in the newer game has been the worst, because you're starting to get more quality out of your budget light, but you're still paying some side effect for that, right? So like an example would be the JCMP, that light that I have from China, and there's another like brand name that's in the UK that all look to be sort of the same light. There's probably some differences in wattage and things like that, but they're roughly the same design. It's got that little manual control inline, right? You're not getting something like an app like you get with Fluval or AI Prime. You're not getting Wi-Fi or Bluetooth control in any way, shape, or form. Or you're getting like the same remote that's been used, like taking the like Phoenix 24/7 design and that design aesthetic that's been used on seemingly 100 lights. Like the problem is this. I don't feel like there's anyone in the budget lighting space who's trying to put out a truly quality budget light. Almost all of them are designed to fail. And as much as I might say that I like, say, like the Phoenix Stingray, this is an example of a budget light I like. If you get any water on that thing, especially if you don't have it well raised, or you get lots of action at the top of your tank that pushes water up through the little diffuser that's protecting the LEDs, if any water contacts that circuit board, it's over. I used to have a 4-foot Phoenix Stingray that I ran on a rack of a bunch of 10s way back when I had several 10s in one of my display rooms, right? Well, the display room is really more accurate. One of my display rooms. One of my rooms full of fish tanks. Like, there's a ton of questions in chat, and you guys are gonna get man, it's gonna get interesting real fast when we get to chat. I love the quality the light puts out. I hate the fact that if a like light breeze vaguely wet hits that light, it's toast. It's just toast. Like I can beat on a Fluval 3 practically, and that thing doesn't care. And yeah, it's an expensive light. A 4-foot Fluval 3.0 is $200 freaking dollars now. They used to be a lot cheaper when they first came out, but you know, we can go over all the reasons. We know they all suck. But it has a strong warranty. It's a good light. It has good features. It's user-friendly. And it's tough as nails. The only downside I would say really to the fluval light, other than the blue light causes algae, is that the little, how shallow it sits on a tank, it doesn't have some form of riser to it, I think is bad for the hobbyist, because it sits like directly on top of the tank. That's its downside. Where we can look at like Beamswork, Nycrew, Aquaneat, each of these lights that have been around for a little while in the budget space, they all have something they're good at, and they all have something they really suck at. Nycrew, too much blue light. Way too much blue light. Beamswork, they dim. You start them running for at least a year, and they start to dim out. The same thing happens with Aquaneat. And Aquaneat has a, like, they each kind of have a different tone, like that color temperature, how it appears to our eyes, that some people just don't like, right? The newer budget lighting is trying to be full spectrum, nice lights. But the problem is there's so many ways to look at them and go, this is a problem, this is a problem. Like, I'm trying not to rag on JC&P, but like, that's the one I have the most recent experience with, right? Because I've been testing it a lot. I mentioned in my initial impression video that the casing on the JC&P light gets hot, right? Because it does. It gets fairly warm. Now, not like you're going to burn yourself hot, but it gets kind of warm. The Beamswork, that it has this huge body to it, right? And it's plastic. It's cheap. It's not as nice as the aluminum body of the JC&P. But because it's so big and broad, the LEDs are spaced out more. They have more room to dissipate their heat. The casing, being plastic, doesn't conduct any of that heat. It stays cool. So despite the fact that the construction is cheaper, and I think that the construction of the JC&P is a significantly better light, it gets hot. Right? So, like, there's all these different downsides you have to look at. And I think the biggest dilemma in budget lighting is partially on us as hobbyists. And let me explain. I'm not trying to downplay anyone who looks at a budget lighting solution. I totally understand cash gets tight in the aquarium hobby. Keeping fish is expensive. It just is. Between all the things you have to do, keeping fish is expensive. Even when you're trying to do everything on a budget, it still costs money, right? I think one of the biggest disservices is that when we fixate on trying to cut some costs, we still kind of expect something really quality. We don't typically downgrade our expectation enough. We downgraded some, but not enough. And the biggest dilemma is, like, especially me, what I deal with is 9 million questions of, what do you think about light X? And 9 times out of 10, it ends up being, I've never tried the light. I can't give you a good opinion. I can look at pictures and look at their documentation and go, well, if it's what they say, but like every company out there upplays what they can do. That's marketing, right? Marketing is going to like be glowing about how amazing something is. And then when you get a hold of it, it's like, yeah, it's not bad, but it's not that great. You know what I'm saying? Where the big thing I think I want to see someone do, any company, I would love it to be someone that listens to people like us. I would love if lighting creators or filter makers took the same stance as Extreme Foods. And I'm going to go off of lights for a second because I want to tell a small story. Extreme, they provided me that big box of all sorts of foods. I'm still going through a bunch of that stuff. I literally bought a spice grinder so that I could grind up some of the pellet foods they sent me to powder, because they're just too big for the rainbow fish's throats. So the rainbow fish can't eat the food. And I want to see like how much they like the food if I grind it down into a powder, like say the aquarium co-op fry food, right? Same same mentality of application, because they'll eat tiny food. I've gone back and forth with almost said JCMP. I've gone back and forth with extreme people with some feedback of just, because they asked me hey, we're going to send you stuff. Please test it. Give us your unfettered feedback. Don't hold your punches. Seriously, if something's wrong, tell us. We want to know. I was recently talking to the folks at Extreme. I was giving them some feedback from a friend of mine who breeds plecos that I trust. Right? I go to this person when I have questions about plecos. And I send back this tiny feedback. Right? Very small. It was a small observation concerning ancistrous plecos. Same day that I sent that email, honestly within 2 hours, but granted it's the right time. It was their morning in my early morning. I got a response saying, "Okay, thanks for the feedback. Do you think if we changed the formula a little bit to do XYZ, that would help?" One piece of feedback. From basically 3 people that were all seeing the same thing. And they were willing to make small adjustments and test it at their cost to see if they could make it better. Can you imagine if the people who made aquarium lights, aquarium filters, aquarium heaters took the same mentality? If they heard from someone like myself, a small YouTuber, but I happen to have a background that involves being professional about testing products, testing things, right? My background is test. Can you imagine if everything in the aquarium hobby took that same approach? Can you imagine how much better every product we have would be? I would be ecstatic if there was any one company out there that took the same approach and had wanted to tackle the budget lighting market. Because I think that for every one guy that wants to buy a Fluval 3.0, or gal, to be fair, right? There are 5 that want to buy a Beebswork, a Nycrew, a Higer, a Jim Bob's Light Shack, whatever it is, right? I think for every one person that's willing to spend $200 plus on a light, there's going to be at least 5 Aquarists that are like, my budget is like $60 for that same size light. Can you imagine it? Because the thing is, you can do a ton of stuff with the hardware as long as the software and firmware is retoolable. Because like there's an example here in chat from WAF, which good to see you. That's the difference between boutique recipes and industrial tooling. You don't get the economies of scale unless you're printing 50,000 PCBs for the lights. Sure. But you can do a lot of things in the software and firmware. Tesla, they make cars, right? They have over-the-air updates that make the electric motor and the way that it uses the power in the battery more efficient. And they do this pretty regularly. Within every nine months to a year, there's a major update. I have friends that have Teslas because they have more money than me that own Teslas and do this kind of stuff. They tell me about these things. It's like, oh yeah, I used to, if I would drive like this, I would only get this much out of my battery. I got an update recently I've been watching. My battery goes longer. Software. The hardware hasn't changed. The software and firmware driving that hardware has. You can do the same thing with lights. Now, filters is a little different, right? But lights, you can do the same thing. So, that's kind of my rant about the problem with the budget. It's more of a rant than anything else. Like, we got lots of questions about budget lighting. And I'm going to get to as many as I can answer. Stephen P., I'll get yours just because I talked about it. The ancestris issue I mentioned. So, with the sinking wafers, which I really like that product, by the way. I quite love it. I'm almost out. I need to go buy more. If you feed exclusively that food for a week or more, several people who are bigger pleco nerds than me and myself have seen that the fish will get a little bloated. Now, we have some theories about this. We don't think it's necessarily entirely the fault of the food because the same thing happens with Repashy. It's not exclusively extreme. But I brought that feedback to extreme. And basically the thing is, like, for every 2 to 3 days that you feed extreme or Repashy, if you give them 1 day of green beans, zucchini, cucumber, you pick your natural veg, right? You don't run into the issue. You're clearing them out, right? But that was the feedback I gave them, and they were like, well, we could make some small changes, and there's XYZ that we do it's like went into some science behind what they're doing based on things in nature that I can't talk about that stuff. But they gave me that in trust. They were like, we can make some small adjustments here that shouldn't change really the overall formula, but might help with that problem. And they were willing to test it and try it. It's pretty freaking cool, if you ask me, being willing to do that, because it costs them a good amount of money to do food and do tests. It's not a cheap process. All right. I know I got a ton of questions about lights. I'm going to try and get through them. Again, for anything in chat, at Bentley Pasco makes it a lot easier for me to see. If I miss your question, please email me, bentley.pasco@gmail.com. I've been a little busier the last few days, but I do generally get to most people's emails within about 3 days. So don't send me emergencies. I'm bad at doing those, but yeah. if you need help at, say, like a light, I'll do my best to help you. All right. So Matthew Schmidt, what's your thought on the Marswell Viva Spectra cost lights for I have no clue. I've never even heard of this light. This is one of the other problems in like budget lighting, is there's so many different ones out there that like you can't keep up. I can barely keep up with some of like the high-tech lighting because the more that they're monkeying with things, it's almost impossible to keep up with everything. Fishy Mailman mentions the Chihiros lights. Yeah, the Chihiros lights are becoming very, very popular. They're also pricey. Very pricey. Yeah, man. I've had a lot of questions to like, hey, what's your opinion on X light? And Mike Baker, my Higer LED performs great, but it sure is a pain to program the custom 24/7 settings. Yeah, I can see that. Any custom 24/7 mode is not going to be easy. It's so hard to find something that's as easy as like the Fluval, because the Fluval Smart app, or AI Prime also has a pretty good app from what I've seen that's controllable. I think it's Wi-Fi because it's a web app. It's pretty good. A lot of folks use them in mostly saltwater side, but there's freshwater versions too. Danny, Bentley, what do you think of the Koval RGB lights? This is another one, like, there's so many of them. Look, I know the name. I need to, like, look at a picture of it to see if it helps me remember this particular light. Oh, yeah! Looking at pictures, this is much more familiar. You really want my true opinion? The Koval light is a Beamswork. You can see, looking at it, it's almost the exact same. It has more LEDs than like a Beamswork EA F-spec, but it's the same casing, it's the same general pattern, it's just more compact, so it has more. So it's basically just a more powerful Beamswork. There you go. There's my opinion. I can tell just by looking at the picture. That's the sad part. I've looked at enough of these lights that come from China, and this I've actually messed with a bunch between me and some friends, and done some analysis on some that I've, even ones I've gotten rid of that they aren't even worth doing videos on. That they're all the same. They're all the same. The price looks decent. I mean, you could get a 45 to 50 inch. So it's a 45 inch actual housing, and then the expandable little things for $70. That's not bad, right? It's not horrible for a 4-foot light, but I'm sure there's cheaper, better options. Although what I will say is that this style of body, that plastic body, right? They don't get hot, and you can run the heck out of them. And these plastic bodies are actually a bit more water resistant than some of the metal ones. Although I'm sure I'm going to find out it's like, it's an aluminum body, you son of a... Right. It looks the same as all the plastic ones. What do you want from me? Can only do so much when I don't have it in my hands. Michelle Lucia. The Fluval light is great because Bentley taught me how to use it. Well, thank you. I love the Fluval lights, man. I love them, but I fully recognize they're expensive, right? I'm just a psychopath that's willing to spend that kind of money on my lighting because it lasts me a long time. I care more about the quality and long-term durability than I do necessarily about saving that extra buck up front. Stephen P. Bentley, do you trust the Nicrew par ratings? No, I never trust a par rating. And let me explain why. Par is useless. All par tells you is how much light is supposed to be there. Lumen can tell you the exact same thing. The only difference is that par usually is given ratings at certain depths so that it inherently accounts for diffraction before looking at anything else. Lumen doesn't do that, right? But lumen is still a power rating. I can look at a 5,000 lumen light and a 3,000 lumen light, and there's a difference. It's the same as would be the difference between a 100 par light and a 70 par light. They're just a way to measure brightness and available light. The only difference is par looks only inside the usable light spectrum for plants, where lumen is the entire light spectrum. That's really the only difference. But par, I think we tie ourselves to par way too much. Now, granted, I'm going to do some par ratings here soon. I'm on a wait list to borrow the par meter from my local club. Thanks, local club. I appreciate it. But I think we tie ourselves way too heavily to things like par, watts, like watts per gallon especially. That's for old fluorescent lights. It doesn't even apply to LEDs. Or even color temperature, the Kelvin. Like, these are things that don't matter to plants. They really don't. Like, par does a little bit. If you start talking like super complex plants that need lots of light because you're pumping tons of CO2 at them, okay, par matters a little bit. But it matters so much more that you have the right amounts of lights within the usable spectrum. PUR, photosynthetic usable radiation, is the number we should care about. The problem is there's no way to actively measure that correctly all the time. There's no perfect way to measure it compared to par. Par is very simple to measure, and there is continuous equipment out there because it matters in certain places. But I think we hold way, way, way too much like this is such an important number. It's not. It's not. I can get you a par 50 light that will grow plants in the right situation better than a par 100 light. The par 100 light will cause, in a situation where the par 50 light is perfect, too much algae. And vice versa. You can get that par 50 light that just doesn't matter if the application is wrong. For those high levels of par, they only really matter if you're doing like super demanding plants. Other than that, most plants don't need very high par. They need something like 60 to 70 par at best. A majority of the plants that we keep the most of, your Java ferns, your Anubiases, your Booses, a lot of your low-tech stems, all the stuff that tends to be the most popular, they need like 30 par, 40 par, at most 50. It's only when we start getting into the true high-tech plants. You look at like Ludwigia Tornado, or although it technically can be done in lower light, Pink Flamingo Crypts, the white Anubias varieties, these things that you basically have to bombard with light to keep them happy. Only then do they care about being 90 plus par. Only then. And then in order to make sure that that par matters, you have to be dumping CO2 into the tank. You have to. Because otherwise, there's more light than the amount of photosynthesis the plants can do, and you will eventually have algae. No matter what system you use. No matter what system. Par is a number that measures something, but it is not the most important number. So any company that claims we have X par, nod and smile. Par doesn't matter. It really doesn't. Not as much as we make it out to do. Also, it is possible to skew results of par. There's ways to do it. You can, let me give you an example. I've been studying Anoxic Filtration lately with Dr. Novak's work. Because I'm curious about it, but it's one of those things where I need a lot of research before I ever dive in and try it. He's talked about turning one of the ADA Superjet canisters, like those crazy expensive, all stainless steel handmade canister filters, into a Anoxic filter, right? He's got this big stuff about it, and he's talking about it. And the pump that is on that is designed to run at a lower power level than what is the power out of the wall in the United States and Canada. So they have a limiter that they send with it to the American customers, and I think Canadian customers as well, that dampens that power down for you so that the pump runs at the correct power rating. You can put lights on the same thing. You can do the same thing to a light, and they'll still run. All of a sudden, their par doesn't look as good. Just saying. Just saying. Paul Soltero. What's up, buddy? I'm using the JCMP on 20 longs at 80%. The plants are growing well, and the fish aren't getting blinded. Perfect. That's another thing. Like, anything where you can dim a light inherently is better than lights that can't be dimmed. There's an extra point of failure. To be clear, there's a higher chance that something can go wrong in it, but usually they're well enough designed that it allows you some flex. Being able to mess with that dimming and stuff, super, super helpful. Super, super helpful. Fish Fever, I actually like this comment, so it's not a question, but I want to put it here. Cheap and inexpensive are not the same thing. Definitely agree. Cheap references quality, inexpensive references cost. Totally. Yes. But often, when we say inexpensive, we mean cheap in our hobby. There's a difference. I certainly agree. There are inexpensive options. Like I would say, buying a used AquaClear is usually inexpensive. But it's not cheap. I can get used AquaClear 110s a lot more inexpensive than I can buying a new one. But it's still a high quality filter. Still runs, still works well. Definitely agree with the statement. Just often we use the words as synonyms as opposed to having slightly different definitions. Oh, I've almost caught up with chat, which might be a lie. There's no way I'm close to catching up with chat. There's the big jump. We got there. Chat caught up and made sure that I knew I am still way behind. Casey, thank you first for the $10 super chat. Definitely not required, but I so appreciate it. Just want to say congrats on the 10K. I haven't been as active on YouTube since I started back at school this month. Congratulations on getting back to school. That has to feel so much better during human malware times. But I always make time for your videos. Thank you so much. Also love the fact that you use the 2 shrimp emotes. Yeah, I got new emotes coming. The artist that I hired for the previous emotes has like a massive backlog, and they're getting through it slowly but surely. Which I just hired an artist on Fiverr. But you know what? Person does really great work, so. I got some cool ones, including one of Papa Limo coming. I'd be really excited for that. Really excited. I'm sure the members are going to love having that at their fingertips. I'm probably going to pronounce this wrong, but Sheffrey. If you can phonetically tell me how to pronounce that correctly, I'd love to know whether I'm doing it wrong or vaguely right. What's the point of buying a $300 light to run it at 20% all the time because it overpowers the tank? This is actually a great question. There is none? Or you like the aesthetic of the light, you like the control of the light. The power of the light is usually not what matters in most of the more expensive lighting. Typically, it is the features that are a part of the light that are a part of why it costs so much, or build quality. Let me give you an example. Something like the UNS Titan, you don't have any control. It's just really nice build quality and extremely powerful. Whereas with, say, a Kessel light or the Fluval or AI Prime, and there's plenty more, Chihiros, you have lots of control where you can control each individual spectrum of light and how powerful they are. You can control timing, all these kind of things. Often, what makes a light significantly more expensive tends to be the additional features built into the light that give us more control, built-in timing, more usability as opposed to just on-off. So, is it a waste to buy a $300 light with a lot of control features because it would be way too powerful for a tank? Potentially, if you can find the right features, right, in a less expensive, less powerful light, then yes, it is definitely a waste. But if you can't find all the features you want from that expensive light in a less powerful, less expensive light, then no. If you specifically want certain things in that $300 light, despite the fact that it's way more powerful than you need, you have to ask yourself that question. For me, software and features are everything, but I'm a tech person. I work in tech, and the more that the software allows me to do things or potentially break what is intended to be done, the better. Something that is just on and off, as opposed to has a built-in ramp up, allows me to control each individual spectrum of light, that appeals to me. But if it doesn't appeal to you, then yes, that $300 light is most certainly a waste. If all you care about is on-off, and it just has to look the right color of white to your eyes to where it is visually appealing, and you can find a $50 light that does the same look, turns on and off, and isn't ridiculously overpowered compared to that $300 the light, then yeah, buy the $50 light. By all means. I'm not trying to say that the problem with budget lighting is that how dare you not spend $500 on a light. Not at all. I think people need to look at what do I want in my light, and then how do I find the one that best fits my budget with the most of these features. And then finally ask yourself, when you found that one, am I cutting away too much to save $10 or $20? I had this conversation somebody asked me, is the difference between this light and that light really worth the extra difference in price? And I looked at the difference in price. It was $13. And in my mind, to me, this is my opinion, right? This is totally based on my personal budget, the way that I approach aquatics, the way that I approach the equipment I use. If I know that the raw build quality is better on something, $13 is negligible. That's one less plant I buy, or one less extra thing of, couple things of frozen food. There is a way to tinker with my budget somewhere else for that one item I'm going to use for years to offset my temporary budget by a month, a week, whatever. When we care only about saving that buck, that's when we do a disservice to ourselves. I'm not saying spend $300 on a light. I'm saying find the right light for your budget and what you want that light to do. If all you want is on-off, to look some form of white, and to fit on your tank, there is like 100 options for you. And it's just picking the one that either A, fits your budget the best, or B, you like the features the best of. What I am saying is don't sacrifice so much just to save 10 or 20 bucks on something that might not last more than a year, when that extra 10 or 20 bucks could be the difference between this light sucks after a year versus, man, this light's been going for 4 years and it's still good. What a deal. Glad I spent that extra 10 or 20 bucks. And in some cases, there's no middle ground, right? There's not the difference between that like $60 light and that $150 light to get enough of a difference. So then you have to ask yourself, is it worth waiting longer to save up that extra money to get that light that I know will last me 3 to 5 years? Or do I want to buy the less expensive light, run it for 2 years, and then get another one of the less expensive light? It's a good question. It's purely up to you. You, the person making the purchase. Doesn't matter what I say. Right? It's your decision in the end. If I tell you that the beam's work is the greatest light ever made, and that no light could possibly be better, I'm sure you can find 10 examples that put that thing to shame, that fit you and your decisions for your fish tank. But it doesn't change this chucklehead's opinion on YouTube, right? The big thing is making sure that you find the thing that fits what you need in your budget. That's all it really comes down to. That's all fish equipment. The only difference is I tend to be the person who has that, like, kind of more like European audiences and Japanese audiences tend to have this most often, is that I care more about product quality than saving a buck. I'll wait 3 months and save up money, personally, to get that better thing that's going to last me 5 years or more, then save that money now so that I can do that thing right now. I would rather do it right the first time. In my head, this is what I mean. Do it right the first time. That's my opinion. But for some people, what I consider doing it right and what they consider doing it right are different. And that's okay, right? It is all about what makes you happiest when you make this decision. Now, can you take information from like the million creators that are out there and go, how much of this changes how I think about things? Sure. That's doing research, right? I research like every product I get interested in buying. Typically, I spend a lot of time researching them. That's why if you'll notice, like any review I do of a product typically comes out months after everyone else's. Because if I've taken the time to buy it, I've probably spent a couple weeks researching it alone. And then I'll take months messing with it before I'm ever going to review it, because I want to make sure that I've done everything I possibly can to poke at it, to prod at it, to figure out what it can and can't do. That's the tester up in this brain. My work is a part of my hobby, period. That's how I roll. I know that was a really long rant on one very simple question, but this just happens, folks. We should know I never shut up. Gary Duncan, some of the budget lights that have the inline channel controls lose their settings every time the timer kicks off and back on, and some don't. How can you know the difference? Good question. My answer to you is this. If there aren't very many reviews, it's almost impossible to know. And it sucks. I tend to rely on reviews or asking the people who make the light, and hopefully they'll have the answer. That's the sad part, right? Is that you have to rely on people. And it sucks, because a bunch of those lights could be amazing. Then you get that one thing where it's like, oh, it switched off and now it doesn't remember what time it is. Like, thankfully, the JCMP light, for the month and a half I've been testing that thing, rock solid timing things and working with them. It's been awesome. But I know there are other lights that are built similar that don't work that well. So it's kind of like one of the risks of a lot of the budget lighting with inline controls is that you kind of are flipping a coin whether or not it's going to function the way you think it will versus however it's actually going to function, right? It sucks. It sucks that that's the truth of it, but it really is. You sacrifice some of the quality and quality of life, if you will. This is something that we use in software, is quality of life, to get something that doesn't cost as much. Sci-Fi Swordsman, are you able to explain, or know someone that can, how fluorescent light degrades over time? I have a T10 fixture that definitely has been changing over the last year. Yes. So fluorescent lighting, okay, you have things inside the fluorescent tube that are, when electricity is applied to them, cause a chemical reaction which creates light, right? And certain cheaper LEDs do the same thing. Over time, that degrades. Think of it the same way that you would look at like half-lives of nuclear chemicals, right? If you're, remember, you're like, go all the way back to high school science and remember half-lives, right? As we use them, that, whether it's the filament or in some cases the lights that actually have like a gaseous chemical that you're igniting basically inside of them. So think like your neon lights and stuff like that do that kind of stuff, right? It degrades over time. So as it degrades, it's not producing as much of that reaction, and thus it becomes dimmer. That's why typically most of like T5, T8, and I think T10, they recommend changing your bulbs once a year. Because they start to have that effect become noticeable after a year. And that means noticeable on a scientific scale level, so that your plants will notice that typically faster than like the human eye does. Science stuff. I almost know things. Danny Wish. Kind of like buying a Lamborghini when the speed limit is 20 miles per hour everywhere. Speed limit is there to suggest that you should not do things. It doesn't say that it's impossible to do things. Not the same comparison. But in the same way, The police could get you just like algae could get you in your fish tank, right? You can do anything you want to. Doesn't mean there isn't a consequence. Francis Taylor, this is a great question. Do you need a light that's the length of your tank, or can you buy one size down? Just curious. So you can buy a size down, but you just have to keep in mind that the spread of lights. So if we look at, like, this is the long way of a light, as I knock my glasses off my face, right? The spread that's front to back on how the light spreads is typically better than the side to side spread. So just keep in mind that when you get something smaller that's not as long as your tank, you're going to, on the edges, the fringes of that tank, you will have dimmer spots. This can be good, because this can be somewhere where, like, you can kind of use lighting to hide your sponge filters and give places for your fish to hide. If they're a little shyer fish, they can have those dark areas to hide in. Just make sure that you don't have, like, your stems that need higher light on the very edges of your tank, and you're going to be okay. You have them more toward the center or closer to where the actual fixture is, where that light's coming down at higher intensity. I have a 48-inch fluval on a 5-inch long tank. The very edge of the tank are a little dimmer, but I put plants that do well in dim light in that area. So I account for that naturally, and they do very, very well. The Fishy Mailman. Thanks, man, for the $10 super chat. For honest and not paid reviews, the radio voice is a bonus as well. I'm going to go get some much-needed video game time. Oh, video game time. I used to get that every once in a while. I was supposed to give myself like 4 hours of video game time last weekend. That didn't happen. I have had Cyberpunk 2077 since it came out, which I played on PC, and I have a really powerful PC. So thankfully I don't run into a lot of the problems that some people have. And I still have not beat the game. It came out in December. It is 3 months almost later, and I have not beat the game. Because I have had so little time. Raphael Swift at Bentley. Is there a reason why fluval lights don't have dedicated green diodes? They do. They have dedicated green diodes on the Aqua Sky light. They just don't necessarily put them on all of the lights. And I don't know what the reason is. I could not tell you. The previous Plant 2.0 had some interesting light choices and what the diodes are, but I think they're trying to focus more on red and blue tone lights, because those are the ones that have been in full spectrum lighting more popular, even though plants don't, while they use blue light efficiently in a sense of it's a part of the scale they use well, they actually don't use it in high quantity. They're very efficient at using it, but they don't use a lot of it. And I hope that makes sense. There's a really important difference between the two of these. So often there's too much blue light in almost like every aquarium light out there. And I think it's just a matter of they look at a certain scientific study, but they don't look at more recent things that have been done with plants using things like green and red light, and showing how blue light really actually doesn't get used by plants as well as we think, because they need very, very little of it. They just use it very, very efficiently. So the thought is like, well, if we dump a lot of blue light at them, they'll use it really efficiently, and it'll be great for the plants. When it's actually like, no, you're dumping so much blue light at it that the algae is going hog wild. It's interesting. I really wish that, like, someone who has less, like, I read a scientific study and has a lot of time just observing how things happen in planet tanks could sit down with some of the engineers that design these things and just, like, give them real world information, as opposed to like, well, the scientific document tells me this, so I'm going to engineer for that. Like, hey, buddy, I'm going to tell you, if you put that much blue light in a freshwater fish tank, you're going to cause algae up the... Kills me. WAF. Yeah, I understand the nutshell, but it's more of a... I like listening to people who really champion a certain way of doing things for a long period of time, because often you'll find one of two things. You'll either find the slip up in where they unintentionally give away part of what they're not telling you, which thus far, Dr. Novak, I'm not trying to say anything negative. I actually think that so far it's been very interesting to listen to a lot of what he has to say and his theories and the stuff that his observations. It's been really interesting for me personally. But in many cases, you listen long enough to where you can find the slip up to where there's something they don't tell you that makes the thing work as well as it does, and it's not just the simple way they present it, or you realize the opposite in that, like, no, really, it's just so consistent in what's going on that it reinforces the theory more and more as you see it applied in multiple different ways. So most of mine has been like watching him apply it in different ways. And I've actually had some correspondence with Dr. Novak, for example, in email. We've gone back and forth a little bit. I'm curious to try some things. It's just a matter of whenever I can actually put a new tank up and have space for it, which right now is not anytime soon. I want new fish. I want them so much. Oh my goodness, did I actually catch up a chat? Or did chat jump? Nope, chat jumped. Got hopeful for a minute there. Okay, guys. We're getting close to where we will be heading off to Dr. Black here soon, but I'm going to get some last questions. Again, if I do miss your question and you need an answer, bentley.pasco@gmail.com. That's my email. Feel free to email me. I will get back to you. I promise. I promise. Just sometimes takes me a few extra days. Hayden Tran, have you ever gone with the DIY light route? I am not much of a DIY guy. And that's just, my time gets really limited. I'm not a super handy person. I'm a very technical person. So, the difference is, like, my dad is a very handy person. He can build all sorts of stuff. But he's not very great with computers, right? That's a technical skill. I'm a very technically minded person. You give me technology and I'm insanely good with it. But, like, I'm terrible at soldering, and most of the DIY light routes require solder work to do them correctly and do them well. And then you're building housings and things like that. I'm terrible at all that stuff. It's not efficient for my time. I am better served, me personally, spending money as opposed to spending time. Just because part of my career, sad to say, and I'm not trying to sound like some hoity-toity person here, is just my spare time is exceedingly valuable, and I don't have enough to build a lot of DIY things. This is why you don't see like lots of DIY do XYZ in your aquarium stuff from me, because it's not my forte. And more importantly, I look at something and I'm like, it will take me 10 hours to do that, or it'll cost me like $150. I'll spend $150 because I can very easily recoup that cost through my career. Right? My job pays well enough. I'm certainly not wealthy, but, I'm comfortable, right? And this is one of the things that, like, I would rather spend, $150 or $200 in a month of my fun budget than spend 10 hours on something. Because that 10 hours of time could be, to me, better spent with doing YouTube, building the Master Aquatic program now, spending time with my lady, because I definitely don't do enough of that. Spending time with my dogs, my fish, you name it. Even just filter maintenance or water changes, right? That time, I get so little of that spare time outside of my work that I am better served spending money than I am DIYing things. Most of it's because I'm terrible at DIY, so it takes even more time for me to do it. Like, I was trying to look at, let me give you an example. I'm going to tell a story, and I'm sorry, it's going to go long, but I'll get more questions. Don't worry. I was trying to build a DIY snail trap a couple weekends ago because I was having a snail problem in 2 tanks. And it's because it's where plecos are, so it's getting overfed on purpose. So snails are just going hog wild too. All right, I want to get rid of the snails. I got too many of them. I want to help clean those tanks up. I was trying to build a DIY snail trap. Let me just put it this way. It's 2 plastic bottles. You cut the top off of one. You cut the bottom off. You cut the top off a second. You take the 2 tops. put them into the one center bit, some rubber bands, a little bit of shaving it down to make it so it's not sharp edges, and you're done. That's it's the trap. Done right there. Simple. Half an hour into messing with bottles and a knife, because I was trying to get it cleaner, I realized, and granted, I was sitting trying to spend some time with Papa Limo at the same time. I realized that in that half an hour, I could have spent $20 on a stupid trap on Amazon, wasted 2 minutes instead of half an hour, and I would have had that half an hour back to do something around my house that I was behind on. And I felt like an idiot. That's how not handy I am. Half an hour of time made me go, I have wasted this. I should have been doing cleaning a filter, doing dishes, doing laundry, spending time with, right. That's why I like DIY lights. No, sir. No. Now, however, there's somebody that's developing a DIY light who's in the fish fam that was like, hey, as soon as I've got this down, can I send you one to test it? I said, yeah, I'll test your light. If you're going to make a DIY light and you want to see how good it is, I'll beat that thing to death through testing and find out how good you've done. It's the difference. That's just how I work. Dr. Box in the chat. What's up, buddy? You'll be going like, yeah, Dr. Box will be going about 10 minutes. Then we'll shuffle me off into the coil of the night. Jerry, not light related, but can you tell me if neon dwarf rainbows would do well in spring tubs? What temps should the water be before taking them outside? I would say in general, try to be over 70. I think you're going to do better at like 72, 74. If you're looking to do a lot of breeding, it depends on where you are. Like if you're in Florida, it's going to be easy. But if you're in, say, like Wyoming, where it's super cold, yeah, they don't necessarily do great down in like the 50s. A lot of those rainbows can do it if they steadily dive down toward like the mid 60s, but they tend to prefer low to mid 70s as far as their temperatures are concerned. There's just a lot tends to be the temperatures where they come from naturally, so it's just how they've evolved over time to handle that kind of temperature. So like 74 tends to be like the sweet spot, or 76 for most rainbows. Very few need to be hotter, except for when raising like babies. You're actually better served at like the 80 to 83 range. And there's a couple of reasons why, but it's basically just they're more, you get higher yields of babies surviving at those warm temperatures, and it just more mimics the year when the spawning happens the most in wild. Really all it comes down to. Bottom dweller aquatics. For $300, it better turn itself on and off and chip it on the electric bill. Oh, man. Yeah, I can understand. Let's see here. I want to catch up on... Oh. Here's another one from Jerry. I'll get it just because it's interesting. A while ago, I bought Twin Stars because I wanted high-tech tank. Should have started with Fluval, but after a few months, one started flickering. Have you ever fixed something like that? No. We'll go back to that. I'm not very handy. I probably could. Like, I do know how to solder. I'm just terrible at it. I have friends that are far better at it, and I'd probably sit there and look at it and try and figure out what was wrong and then take it to those kind of people. Like, I have my friends who are far more hardware-minded, like electrical engineering paths and stuff like that. That I rely on for that kind of stuff. Some of which are like people I even work with. Like I happen to be very lucky in that a friend of mine who's been a friend for the last decade works on the same project I do just by pure happenstance. And he's on the hardware side where I'm technically on the software side, even though a lot of my work has to do with hardware work. Omar, personally for me, it depends on two things: tank depth and plant selection. Yeah, I mean, a lot of your decisions in light should basically be those two questions: tank depth, plant selection, and then finally budget. Those are like the three things that matter the most in the grand scheme of things for most tanks. WAF Bentley, start cheap, fail cheap. If you run into the ground, then buy quality. No one learns to drive in a Ferrari. Yeah, I mean, it's true. I learned to drive in a an old work van, an old Chevy Astro work van. But my first car was an old 80s Firebird. I grew up on Knight Rider, man. I couldn't help it. Tian Aqua, thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. No problem. That's part of the thing I love the most about YouTube. I get to share what stupid things I've learned over time and answer questions and try and help people. It's fun times for me. You'd be surprised. Like the education side of YouTube is the thing that I probably love the most, other than just like the interaction with people, because I'm such a like extrovert naturally by personality. I love just chattering with people, especially about fish. I love chattering fish. Let me tell you what. Must catch up on chat better. W. Marion, in your question, it makes it easier. Oh, it's just saying to put at my name so I can see your question better. So Desert Fish Keeper, now based on that one. If my beams work is losing its punch, can I run it longer to get the same effect, like getting the same volume trickled in slower? Yes and no. It depends on the plant. Certain plants prefer more intensity for a short period of time, where other plants actually prefer lower intensity light for a longer period of time. Examples: Amazon swords and crypts, and even to some case Boost and Anubias, prefer much lower intensity light for longer periods of time. So like you could have, say, we had that discussion about par, right? You could have 40 par light for 10 hours a day. And those plants would do far better than if you had 100 par light for 4 hours a day, right? So it depends heavily on the plant. If your beams work are losing their punch, but your plants still look like they're healthy, don't stress too much about it. You're doing fine. Watch your plants. Your plants will show you everything you need to know. They're like the canary in the coal mine in a way. Like they'll tell you when things are going wrong. Omar Monsif rip League time. I used to play League of Legends, actually. I almost never play it anymore. And that's just a lot of time. But yeah, I used to play quite a lot, actually. And now, everyone I used to play with, almost none of us play anymore. Because of time. Stupid time. There's not enough of it. Oh, man. Chat jumped again. That's how far behind I am. 3B Aquatics. Way too much DIY. Hey, you know what? A lot of people are really into DIY, so I understand why it's popular. But yeah, Paul Soltero, assassin snails. I'm trying really hard not to solve my snail problem by buying things that murder snails, because in a lot of those tanks, I would then have to like find a way to get rid of all the assassin snails, because it's places where like fish eggs are going to exist. But yeah, I probably should just like stop slacking, go out to Aquarium Co-op and buy a bunch of assassin snails. Just send in the kill team. I was trying to just like capture all of my snails and put them in a tank where I don't care that they exist that much, or just, give them to a friend to feed a puffer. Because I have lots of friends that have puffers. Let me tell you what, I got one guy that keeps like trying to get me to keep puffers. It's Preston John. It's like personal puffer guru. It's pretty sweet. All right, I'm going to make I got two last questions I'm going to grab here. So, Sean, you're first, a.k.a. Old Fish Guy. Or is that Olay Fish Guy? Get the two E's. You never know, right? Recommendations on any low-maintenance plants with each nutrients from water, not substrate, other than, man, so many caveats, water sprite, mosses, guppy grass, any Vallisneria. Other options. Pogostemon stellatus octopus. That stuff will just chew through stuff. But realistically, if you want... so water sprite does a really, really good job. So does water wisteria. And the way that I actually make them do this better is I float them. So I treat them like floating plants, and they get these huge like root systems that are in the middle of the water column, and they just annihilate stuff. If you want like the second plant that's really good at doing that, hornwort. Hornwort is a really, really, really efficient user of nutrients in the water column, and you just leave it floating. You can do the same thing. It's similar to guppy grass, where that it can go crazy. It doesn't go quite as crazy as guppy grass, but if you have enough stuff there, hornwort will definitely like be a fast grower. But I think in general, it's actually a cooler like plant structure in general. I personally like the way it looks a lot more than say guppy grass. I kind of hate guppy grass because that stuff sometimes becomes impossible to get rid of. Bottom Dollar Aquatics. Is the Fluval 95 gram CO2 kit worth buying? No. Oh, I'm sorry. I was supposed to read the rest of the question. I want to set up CO2 this week and keep the price around $100. What would you do? Also, no DIY sugar and CO2. Well, come on. We know that I don't do DIY stuff. Actually, so what I would start looking into is this. There's a... I got to look it up. I'm sorry. This is taking time. Dr. Black, I promise I'm going to send people your way in just a minute. There's a, like... This here... Okay. There's the FZ... makes this. They have a single stage yeah. This guy right here. I need to make sure I've got, there's two different ones. I want to make sure I'm not doing the wrong one here. Bonk, yeah. There's a couple different ones of this, but I'll link this one here. Come on. It's kind of like the CO2 art design. This is the F-Zone Aquarium CO2 regulator. I've had really good feedback on these from some folks that have used them. If you want, there's also one that has a little bit larger dials, which I'll link that as well. I actually probably like this one better. Personally, I would go with the second one I'm linking, with the big white-faced dials, just because they're easier to read. This is very similar to the basic CO2 art regulator in its design and build quality from what I've heard from people that have CO2 arts and have tried this. It's not very expensive. Then what you want to do is go get a tank used. So you can find people that used to do like home brewing or stuff like that. Very often you'll find people with empty tanks that they sell on Craigslist or OfferUp or any of that. And they sell them very cheap. Very, very, very economical compared to what it costs to buy one new. And then you just take it to a cylinder exchange it out for a full cylinder for, like $20 or whatever. But this, as far as a regulator, is much, much better, plus a real tank, and it will last you an extremely, extremely long time. Very, very long time. Compared to doing those little stupid CO2 harders. The biggest problem with that little setup from Fluval, and this is one of the products I hate the most that they make, is that those little canisters do not last long at all, and they become excessively expensive to replace over and over and over again. Yes, the initial investment is a little higher for a bigger regulator that does a proper CO2 tank, and the initial tank will cost you a little more, but you can find them used and save a bunch of money. That's how I've done it. Every one of the tanks I have, I've bought used. Immediately took it to like Central Welding Supply or a brewery store and just cylinder exchanged it out for basically a brand new cylinder and been perfectly fine, right? But those last so much longer. They cost way less money in the long run, and they're a more efficient system. Those little Fluval systems suck and they gas off like crazy. You do no. Dude, just save yourself the headache. Stay away from them. All right. I'm going to get one more. I promise. I said I was going to only do two, but I'm going to do a third. Don't want to get it run over. Okay, here you go. Mike Stanbaugh. What's up, buddy? Have you seen the Nylock G lights before? What? He's doing lights now? Oh, my Lord. No, I have not, but I'm just going to take a quick look. Why not? I'm going to have to do this the hard way, aren't I? Does he have them on Amazon, or are they on his website? Well, now I'm going to have to look and tell you later. But, yeah, no, I did not know that Nylock G had lighting. I'm just used to him doing fertilizers. All right, guys. If I missed your question, please shoot me an email. Candy's been putting in chat. Candy, thank you so much. The super mod, as always, you're always fantastic. Bentley.pasco@gmail.com. Shoot me an email. I'll happily get back to you. My work week has been a little crazy the last few days, so I'm a little bit behind, but typically I respond within 2 to 3 days. So no crazy emergencies, right? It's going to be too slow, but questions, happy to help people out, balancing tanks, all that kind of stuff. We will see you guys next Tuesday for some updates and various other chatter about aquarium stuff. And be looking forward to this week's video. If you haven't seen it, we did a 10,000 subscriber video. There may or may not be a reason to watch the video all the way to the end. Just a suggestion. If you missed it, or maybe you didn't put a certain comment in the video, you might want to go back and check that bad boy out. Just saying, it hasn't had a lot of views compared to the normal video, so I know some people are missing out. Which means your odds of enjoying the thing are better. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching. And stay awesome. Always, always, always stay awesome. Have a good night, guys. See you next week.